So this is the 2012 released free response question number 1, and now we're going to look at the scoring for all 4 parts. So if you went to the AP Central website and downloaded the scoring guidelines as per the earlier directions, you have in front of you the scoring guidelines. If you don't have that, take a minute to go get them. Now, the first thing that you see under the scoring guidelines is they restate the question. So everything here, they're just rewriting the question, so you have that to refer to. And now we have down inside here part A, part B, part C, part D. Now we can see what the points are for each part. Part A is worth 2 points, part B is worth 2 points, part C is worth 3 points, part D is worth 2 points. These points are broken down to very specific things that the test is looking for. And when your score is evaluated by hand by a team of hundreds of mathematicians, and you will generally have at least 2 or 3 professional test scorers look at all of your work, every single thing that you write, and they will have this exact same type of a breakdown in front of them. So they're going to be looking for, under our part A, our 2 parts are 1 point for getting the estimate and 1 point for getting the interpretation with units. So let's see what that means for our part 1 and see if we got full points for number 1, for part A. So here's our question number 1, part A. Here's what we wrote. So now let's look at what score we get. So the first thing that they're looking for is part 1, the estimate. So the estimate is we were supposed to estimate W prime. If you go back to that question, we're estimating W prime of 12, and we came up with 1.017. So when they say the estimate, we got this number, and the number we got, it says right here. So you can see that it says we're supposed to get 1.017 or 1.016. Now we need to have shown our work to get that point. However, notice that you don't get points for your work. So I could have a mistake in my work and come up with the right answer, and that would be very lucky, but I got the estimate right, I get the point. So I've got 1 point right there. Then it says interpretation with units. That's our next point. Remember what it said? It says interpret the meaning of your answer in the context of this problem, and we talked about how important that is. So here's what they wrote. The water temperature is increasing at a rate of approximately 1.017 degrees Fahrenheit per minute at time t equals 12 minutes. So this, what I wrote was the water in the tub is getting warmer at a rate of 1.017 degrees Fahrenheit per minute. Now, some of the key things, I said it was getting warmer. They said it was increasing. We need to have said somehow that it was getting larger. The units are degrees Fahrenheit per minute. I wrote it like this, degrees Fahrenheit per minute. So I've said that it was increasing. I've said that it was degrees Fahrenheit per minute. I said it was the temperature of the water, so the water in the tub. I said it's getting warmer. I guess we would say that getting warmer means the temperature is increasing. So they got their language a little bit more technical than mine. Probably we're not going to lose the point for that. Now I noticed this, they put here at time t equals 12 minutes. At time t equals 12 minutes. Now that's something that is lacking from what I wrote as a reason. So I think it's a little bit of a toss-up as to whether I would get that interpretation with units point, because I said the water was increasing, the temperature was increasing, I said it was increasing at a certain rate, I used degrees Fahrenheit per minute, but it's actually quite important that the meaning of W prime of 12 is not just that it's always increasing at that rate, it means it's increasing at that rate exactly at this time, t equals 12 minutes. So I might not have gotten that interpretation point. And I think that to correctly interpret I interpreted what the W prime meant, that's all here. But I didn't interpret what the of 12 meant. That's this part that they wrote, but I didn't. So I might lose that point. Now I'm gonna be hard on myself. I'm gonna say I lost that point. They might give it to me. I don't know. Let's go to our next point, our next part. Part 2, part B actually, sorry, these are letters, part B. So now part B is worth 2 points. I get 1 point for getting the value and 1 point for getting the interpretation with units, same thing as up there. So the correct answer for the value is 16. Well, we got 16, so that's right, that's 1 point. Now we need to interpret it. The water has warmed by 16 degrees Fahrenheit. Now this time I'm the one who said the temperature increased. But those two things mean the same thing. Warmed, temperature increased means the same thing. They said it's the water. I was nice enough to say that the water's in the tub, but I guess we know there's not any other water in the problem, so they'll probably give me that. Over the interval t equals 0 to t equals 20 minutes. And I wrote that, and I remember hesitating about should I write that or not. From time t equals 0 to time t equals 20 minutes. But I think it's fairly clear that we need to write that. It says the water temperature has warmed by 16 degrees Fahrenheit over the interval from t equals 0 to t equals 20 minutes. So I need to again interpret the meaning of these limits on the integral from 0 to 20. So I did that this time, so I think I got full points on that one. So we got 2 points there. All right, next part. So here's our part C. On part C, we get 3 points for part C. That's not surprising because that was the hardest part, and they tend to give more points for the hardest part. So point 3, we get 1 point for doing the left Riemann sum, 1 point for getting the approximation right, and 1 point for the underestimate with reason. So underestimate means, remember we had to say that it was underestimate, so we'll come back to that. So our first point comes from getting the left Riemann sum. So now they've written it out like this. They wrote out this, and they wrote out this. Now this right here is what we need to get the points for the left Riemann sum. And one way that I'm interpreting this, it might be that if we had accidentally done the right Riemann sum, so in other words, if we, instead of 4 by 55, we called our area 1 4 by 57 and did a right rectangular approximation, then I think that's where we would lose this point. But since we have the correct numbers here, see 4 times 55, 5 times 57.1, 6 times 61.8, and 5 times 67.9. So as long as we have those, I believe they're going to give us credit for having done a left Riemann sum. So we did that. That's 1 point for getting our left Riemann sum. That's right there. Now our approximation, remember, means the approximation of the average value. That's what we were supposed to do, is approximate this 1/20th of this, the average value. So that means we're supposed to remember to multiply this by 1/20th. So here's where we put in our 1/20th, and that's where we got our second point by getting, see, 60.79, 60.79. So this one did not have, we could write 60.790 to have our 3 decimal places. But since the last decimal place was 0, we don't have to write that. So the 60.79, they give us the correct answer here. And then the last thing they say is, this approximation is an underestimate. Now I did not use the word underestimate, but I did write this. Here's our approximation, and I said that it was less than the actual value of the integral. So I think we can say mathematically, this is equivalent to saying that the approximation is an underestimate. So I think I'm going to get the point for writing that. Although if I wrote out the words, the approximation is an underestimate, that probably would be a little closer to what they were looking for. But the real critical thing here is the reasons. Because a left Riemann sum is used. Because a left endpoint sum is used. And the function w is strictly increasing. And I changed it to f here, but they're probably going to let me get away with that, is an increasing function. Now, if they're going to let me get away with not saying a strictly increasing function, I don't know about that one. They said strictly increasing, so it probably would be a good idea, since they went out of their way to say strictly increasing, that probably we should mirror their language whenever possible and say strictly increasing. I just said increasing, but I'm going to say that's worth the point. So I think we got 3 points on our part C. And now our part D. Oh, actually, I did write that final sentence. Therefore, the approximation underestimates the average temperature. I forgot that I wrote that final sentence there. The approximation underestimates. So I did match this wording, which is good. And you'd like to try and match the wording that they use. And our last part is part D. So here's part D. We can see part D is worth 2 points. We get 1 point for 1 point for the integral. So that probably means this right here. That's worth 1 point to get the 2.043155. And then knowing that you had to add it to the 71, that's the other point. So here's our 1 point for getting 2.043 for this integral. Now they wrote out more decimal places here because that was not their final answer. in their final answer 3 decimal places rounded or truncated. That's what we wrote right here, and that's worth our 1 point there. Notice they did not even write a sentence. I wrote a sentence at the end: the temperature of the water at time t equals 25 is 73.043 degrees Fahrenheit. Just because, you know, you can't go wrong writing a sentence because they often want one. But all they asked is, what is the temperature? We could have apparently, by their scoring sheet, we could have just said 73.043. They didn't even ask for units. But it's generally good practice to write out the units and the final value. So let's see. We got 2 points for this one, so that's a 2 for part D. On our part C, we got 1, 2, 3 points, so we got 3 points for our part C. And for our part B, we got 2 points, so 2 points for part B. And on our part A, I think just because we missed this at time t equals 12, we only got 1 point there. So now we're going to total this up. We got 8 points out of our 9. So if you get more than half the points on a free response question, you're looking good. And if we can get 8 out of 9 on one like this, where we really understand this question well, then that will make up for some of the other ones where we get less than half of the points. So this is how they score it. What you want to do with the remainder of these released free response questions is try to do the questions and follow their scoring, because if you understand their scoring, you understand what they're looking for, then you're going to put the things that they're looking for, and you're going to get all of the points because you know the kind of things they're looking for. And that's our goal, is for you to get a good AP score.